Oi gente, como eu sempre digo, a partir de agora, menos emoção e mais razão, mas eu confesso que dessa vez vai ser mais complicado conter a emoção, porque eu vou conversar com um autor que eu gosto muito. Ele escreveu um dos livros que tá na lista do meu primeiro clube do livro, o Justiça, e além de várias outras obras, lançou agora recentemente a Tirania do Mérito, ou The Tyranny of Merit. Eu tenho aqui a primeira edição em inglês deste livro, que é o lançamento de Michael Sandel, professor de Harvard, e maravilhoso. Eu recomendo muitíssimo a vocês. Estou muito animada por poder conversar com ele sobre essa nova obra. Aqui com o título do livro em inglês, vocês já perceberam que o meu accent não é assim tão maravilhoso, mas eu vou me esforçar ao máximo para falar o melhor inglês que vocês já viram eu falar. Vocês não devem ter me visto falar inglês, então seja o que Deus quiser. Vamos lá começar essa conversa? Tenho certeza que vocês vão gostar. Aproveitem para deixar o like de vocês, se inscrever no canal e compartilhar esse vídeo, principalmente com seus amigos, porque ele vai falar coisas muito, muito importantes para a gente compreender o mundo em que a gente vive. E ele fala sobre a realidade brasileira, tá? Fiz perguntas especificamente sobre Bolsonaro. Confere aí. I feel the meritocratic ideal is seductive because in it, personal effort receives its reward. This society, in which upward mobility would be achievable to all through hard work, will be fairer than those that are organized around accidents of birth or proximity to power. Could we say that your new book puts an end to the illusion of meritocracy?
You're right, Gabriela. The meritocratic ideal is seductive, and in many ways it's appealing. Because if the alternative is nepotism and family connections and privilege as a way of allocating jobs and opportunities, meritocracy seems much better, and it is better. However, there are two problems with meritocracy. The first is familiar. We don't live up to the meritocratic ideals we profess. To have a truly meritocratic way of allocating income and wealth and jobs and opportunity, places in universities, chances have to be truly equal. And we know that they're not. To take one example from American highly selective universities, at the Ivy League universities, despite generous financial aid policies, there are more students from the top 1% of families, top of the income scale, than there are students from the bottom half of the country combined. So it's clear that chances are not equal. But there's a further problem, and this is the main argument of my book, The Tyranny of Merit. Even if we could bring everyone to the same starting point, even if we had a perfect meritocracy, meritocracy has a dark side. And the dark side is that it creates a society of winners and losers. Those who land on top, if chances are equal, those who land on top come to believe that their success is their own doing, something they've earned on their own, and that they therefore deserve all the rewards that a market bestows on the winners. And they also come to believe that those who fall short, those left behind, have no one to blame but themselves. They too must deserve their fate. So this is the dark side of meritocracy. It generates hubris among the winners. It leads the winners to forget the luck and good fortune that helped them on their way. And it leads them to look down on those less fortunate, less credentialed than themselves.
When the data are exposed, people tend to come back with the classic response: equal opportunity. The concept is so popular in Brazil, even left-wing politicians have embraced it as some sort of mantra. All problems will be solved once the same starting point is established for everyone. At long last, inequalities in outcome may be attributed solely to each person's hard work or lack thereof. Is this assessment correct, or is there still room for arbitrariness when figuring the odds to personal success?
It's true. We tend to embrace the slogan of equal opportunity. And we hear this from the center left and from the center right. If only we could create truly equal opportunity, and different political factions disagree about what exactly this means, but the idea of equal opportunity is offered by most mainstream politicians as the solution to inequality, bringing everyone up to the same starting point, and then beginning the race. But here's the problem. If everyone really were, take the analogy of a race, Gabriela, if everyone really did start the race at the same starting point, and if everyone had access to the same training and the same coaches and the same nutritional supplements, then who would win the race? Who would be the winners? It's predictable. The fastest runners, those with the greatest athletic gifts, those who were fastest at running. But this talent, is it really the doing of the fastest runner? Or take famous sports stars who make tremendous amounts of money. Take Neymar, who makes an enormous amount of money as a great athlete, or LeBron James, the basketball player in the US. Now, of course, they work hard, they train hard. Their success partly reflects their effort. But we know that it's not only effort. I could practice football for a lifetime and never be as good a football player as Neymar. Or I could practice basketball all day long and never be as good a basketball player as LeBron James. So talent, native abilities, these are gifts. These are not the doing of the successful. Whatever gifts or talents you or I might have that enable us to flourish or to have some measure of success, it's important for us to recognize that there's luck involved in, first of all, in having a certain talent, but there's also luck involved in living in a society that prizes and rewards the talents I happen to have. Is it Neymar's doing that he lives at a time and in a society that loves football? Is it LeBron James doing that he's lucky that he lives in a society that loves basketball? Not really. It's really their good luck. If Neymar had lived back in the days of the Renaissance, they weren't that interested in football. They cared more about fresco painters. So there are two elements of luck. Having the talents, gifts in the first place, and living in a society that prizes and rewards the talents that some people have more than the talents that other people happen to have. So for this reason, even a perfectly equal starting point for the race would still allocate the winnings, allocate advantages on the basis of abilities and gifts and accidents of fortune that the successful can't claim are their own doing. So this is why, important though equality of opportunity is, and it is important, it's a remedial principle. And even a society with perfect equality of opportunity would not be a fully just society, nor would it be a good society, unless we found other ways to enable the winners to share their winnings with those less lucky than they.
In your book, you argued that the ideal of meritocracy makes winners see their own success as a fair reward for their ability, whereas losers not only have to deal with the scorn of the winners, but are also unable to find scapegoats for their failure. Can this be related to the spread of conspiracy theories and post-truth? Can we think of a movement searching for an alternate version of reality where my failure results from a conspiracy of the elites or any other group that prevents me from being successful. If I haven't won, this is not because I didn't deserve to, but because you stole this from me.
Yes, I do think that the dynamic you described, Gabriela, is an important part of the conspiracy theories that we see abounding in politics today, and it feeds the right-wing populist political appeals. And in a way, what you've described is exactly how this arises with a society divided between winners and losers, where the winners believe they've earned it, they deserve it, and where the losers not only are looked down upon by the winners, but lack a very good, come to absorb the winner's attitude. They lack scapegoats, as you put it. They lack a way of explaining why exactly they've been left behind, why exactly their work is no longer respected and valued by the larger society. And so this leads to a turn to conspiracy theories and to political figures who voice and exploit their resentment and their grievance and their sense of humiliation. In many ways, those left behind in a meritocracy. One way that this has been put, Michael Young coined the term meritocracy in the late 1950s. He was a British sociologist. He wrote of the rise of the meritocracy. And when he coined the term, he did not present meritocracy as an ideal, as we have come to think of it. He presented meritocracy as a dystopian scenario. And the way he put it, the way he put the point you've just raised, is that meritocracy, he anticipated, would lead those who lost out to be morally naked, to feel that their failure was their fault, that they had no one else to blame. And so I think you're onto something here. And what I tried to add to this diagnosis in the Tyranny of Merit is that this has fueled not only conspiracy theories, but also the populist backlash. Because an important source of the backlash against elites is the sense that meritocratic elites, credentialed elites, professional elites, look down on those who lack a university degree, look down on those less credentialed than themselves, look down on the contributions they make, and consider that their struggles are their own fault. And so I think this leads to a sense of humiliation, also to a sense of disempowerment that leads to the embrace of conspiracy theories, which are theories typically attractive to those who are disempowered. And it fuels the kind of right-wing populist movements that offer to channel and express these grievances, these resentments, this sense of humiliation, Gabriela.
Still on this world divided by winners and losers, you often mention the arrogance of winners, deluded about their own value because of this logic of meritocracy and their consequent contempt for losers, which result in a harmful effect on the self-esteem, both social and personal, of the latter. Here in Brazil, we have seen this guy who is still considered an underdog become president, even though he won the election. I think that part of this unshakable identification from part of his voters with him is precisely a reflection of their own resentment about that arrogance. Every time new leaderships in politics, the academia, or in the media refer to President Bolsonaro as an underdog, as a former entirely undistinguished congressman, these people feel almost personally attacked and react as many people receiving criticism would. They will avoid dialogue and will reinforce this identification because the fact that a person like that is sitting on the president's chair almost make their own existence legitimate after being neglected for so long. Does that make any sense to you?
Well, yes, I think you've described the phenomenon very well. And the way I make sense of it is, and this is what I mean really by the tyranny of merit, is that the backlash against the tyranny of merit is a backlash against elites who believe that their success is their due, the measure of their merit. It's a backlash against experts, against professional, credentialed classes, and it expresses grievance and resentment. And we see this with Bolsonaro and with Trump. They are similar in this respect. Now, they are the winners in that, I mean, Bolsonaro is president of Brazil. Trump was president of the United States until his defeat by Joe Biden. And in Trump's case, he's a wealthy man. So it might seem puzzling. Why is he not considered an elite? Why is he an effective voice of resentment and grievance and anger against elites? It's an interesting feature of this authoritarian populist movement that it taps into anger against not elites understood as wealthy businessmen or real estate developers. It's really about resentment against meritocratic elites, credentialed elites, the professional classes. This is what the resentment is about. So it doesn't matter that the voice of that grievance can be a successful politician or business person. What matters is that these figures, Bolsonaro and Trump, channel and express grievance and resentment against intellectual elites, media elites, professional elites, credentialed elites. That's what it's about, and that's what connects. Or so I try to argue in the book, Gabriela. That's what connects the special sense of humiliation on which right-wing populist figures draw to meritocracy, to the tyranny of merit, to the meritocratic hubris that the successful express when they look down on those less successful, less credentialed than themselves. So I do think this is an important source of the populist appeal, the right-wing populist appeal, the backlash against meritocratic credentialed elites. It's not a backlash against wealthy business people.
Brazil is still a predominantly Catholic country, but we have seen a significant growth of fundamentalist Protestant faith, mainly in the form of neo-Pentecostal churches preaching the prosperity gospel. This growth has significantly manifested in politics. Is their growth connected to a stronger meritocracy discourse among us?
It's difficult to make direct connections between religious traditions and political arguments and political ideologies and political projects. However, I think there is something to what you suggest. And in the book, I discuss the prosperity gospel, which is one branch of evangelical Protestantism. The prosperity gospel actually is a kind of concentrated expression of the meritocratic idea that I'm describing and analyzing in the book. Because the prosperity gospel interprets health and wealth as rewards for faith and for living well and for believing. So much so that when people suffer setbacks, including health setbacks, prosperity gospel thinking tends to attribute those setbacks to having fallen short in matters of faith. So the structure of prosperity gospel thinking, that health and wealth are rewards for faith and belief and living in accordance with faith, this reflects the structure of the meritocratic way of thinking. Now, those who embrace the meritocratic way of thinking, who believe that success generally is proof of one's virtue, they may not themselves, those who embrace the meritocratic, may not be adherents of the prosperity gospel, but there is a close and interesting parallel between them. And I do in the book have a chapter about the theological origins, the deep background to the meritocratic belief. And it goes back to debates, not about who deserves to be rich, but debates about who deserves to be saved, who deserves salvation. Is it a matter of desert? And this was, I described the theological debate where Augustine and Catholic thinkers insisted that salvation is not our doing. It's an act of grace by God, unconnected to merit or desert. And Luther, the Protestant Reformation, also held this view, that who will be saved has nothing to do with what people deserve. God can decide for himself, and gradually, I show with the Protestant work ethic, from Luther and Calvin, who held this strong notion of grace as the source of salvation, not merit. Gradually, within Protestantism and with the Puritans, including those who came to America, the idea of hard work, first it was a sign that one had been marked for salvation, but then it evolved into being seen as a source of merit and salvation, hard work. And this transition, this theological transition, pointed toward the ideas of merit that we have today and that are prominent today. So I do think there may well be a connection between the power and influence of meritocratic in societies where the prosperity gospel strand of Protestant theology is influential and present. There is a close connection between ideas about whether salvation is a matter of merit or grace and our secular debates about whether being successful in material terms is the result of merit or grace. It's a fascinating connection.
The ideal of meritocracy, as you suggest in your book, exalts freedom, the ability to control one's destiny through hard work. Challenging this ideal by arguing how arbitrary success ultimately is brings back the awareness that we cannot totally control fate, and that our success or failure do not depend solely on ourselves. How could we avoid becoming complacent? After all, if success in life does not depend on effort, I can just sit and wait for it to happen.
Gabriela, it's an important question, because a thoroughgoing critique of merit as the basis of success seems to suggest that effort has nothing to do with it. It could seem to be a kind of counsel of complacence, just as you say. And the same is true. This goes back to the part of our discussion about merit and grace theologically. A thoroughgoing ethic of grace or gift that simply says what will be, my fate will be determined by accident or by the grace of God and has nothing to do with human agency. Too thoroughgoing an ethic of gift and grace can undermine the idea of human agency. It can undermine the idea that we are capable of shaping the forces that govern our lives. So we need to navigate this tension between merit and grace or gift carefully. I would not argue that effort has no bearing on success in life, or that hard work shouldn't matter. I think we can still embrace a conception of human agency and freedom without embracing the thoroughgoing notion that we are self-made and self-sufficient. This really is the idea, the self-image, that I take issue with in the book. It's a mistake to assume, as our public life increasingly encourages us to assume, that we are self-made and self-sufficient. This is the idea, a kind of a notion of hyper-mastery that misses the role of luck in life, that forgets the role of fortune that helps us on our way, that forgets our indebtedness for success, our indebtedness to family, to teachers, to community, to country, to the times in which we live. So I'm arguing against a thoroughgoing notion of self-making and self-mastery, which is tempting because it seems the ultimate expression of freedom. But in a way, what the argument I make in The Tyranny of Merit is that this idea of unfettered freedom misses something important about what it is to be a human agent and a human being, which I argue requires a sense of being situated in, encumbered by my debts and allegiances and sense of belonging. Too thoroughgoing a notion of self-making and self-sufficiency is destructive of community. It's destructive of solidarity. If I really believe that everything I achieve is my own doing, it's very difficult to have a sense of responsibility for the community as a whole and for those who struggle. But you're right, Gabriela, to suggest that the alternative to this hyper-agency that I criticize can't be the opposite extreme of a doctrine of gift and grace so thoroughgoing that it extinguishes any notion that I can have a hand in shaping, in cultivating my talents and gifts, and in shaping my destiny or the destiny of those with whom I share a common life.
If it can be said that people are not entirely responsible for their success, does the same apply to a nation? How does the ideal of meritocracy affect how citizens of developing countries feel as compared to those from developed ones?
It's a very interesting question, Gabriela, because the same critique of meritocracy that I make about individual success also applies to the inequalities between countries, between rich countries, poor countries, and countries in between. And there is a tendency of rich and powerful countries to attribute their wealth and power to their virtue, to their goodness. And in the book, I discuss a phrase, a slogan that has become very familiar in US politics. We heard it from Hillary Clinton. We heard it from previous politicians She used it in her acceptance speech when she was nominated in 2016. America is great because America is good. Slogan, it goes back to Ronald Reagan, who began using it frequently in his speeches. And what's interesting is that this slogan, America is great because America is good, was embraced by center-left and center-right politicians alike across the political spectrum. It's a kind of providentialist thinking that applies to countries what a providentialist, meritocratic thinking applied to individuals says about individual success. And so in the Tyranny of Merit, I try to call both into question. I focus mainly on the way in which meritocratic hubris fails to address inequalities of income and wealth within societies. But this slogan, America is great because America is good, shows that meritocratic hubris also applies to inequalities among nations. And I think we need to have a critical examination of this assumption with regard within societies, but also across societies.
Some thinkers believe that in the future, artificial intelligence will make a vast number of people obsolete, so to speak. While people are empowered by their own value today, what will happen when machines are more intelligent, creative, strong, and accurate than any human being? Will we recognize our defeat?
Part of the market-driven globalization project that we've been discussing, that has been disempowering in many ways for a great many people, it's gone hand in hand with a certain belief about technology. That technology is an autonomous force, that it doesn't yield to a political direction or guidance, that we have simply to adapt to whatever technology provides. And on some scenarios, that means smart machines that will make work obsolete for many people. And then the question is what to do with those people, how to support them. I think this is the wrong way of thinking about it. I think we should have a robust public debate about what kinds of artificial intelligence we want to develop and implement. I mean, look at the development of vaccines during this pandemic. Now, you could say, well, technology makes certain vaccines possible, certain drugs possible, and not others. But is technology really acting autonomously, or is it responding to interests and markets and demand and supply? We have great pharmaceutical companies who have been unable to come up with a cure for malaria, but they have come up with a cure for erectile dysfunction. Why is that? Is it because that's just how technology develops? Technology is just better at developing cures for rich country ailments and not for developing country ailments? No, it's because technology responds to human interests and human purposes. And we see this when the pharmaceutical companies were able to develop vaccines for the coronavirus very, very quickly. I think we should apply the same lesson about the need to direct technology to serve human purposes, rather to unravel social bonds when it comes to work. And so I argue in the Tyranny of Merit that one of the priorities in our public life should be to shift our focus from arming people for meritocratic competition to a focus on renewing the dignity of work and finding ways to reward work, both in terms of pay and in terms of social recognition and esteem, even if that work is not performed by professional credentialed elites. Thank you, Gabriela. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I can see why so many viewers in Brazil and beyond follow your website and the discussions you have, which really elevate the terms of our public discourse in our public life. It's been a privilege to be with you. Thank you.
Bom, é isso. Espero que vocês tenham gostado. Eu com certeza adorei. Enfim, me senti muito lisonjeada por ter sido convidada para bater esse papo com o Sandel sobre o novo livro dele, A Tirania do Mérito. E aí eu já vou deixar aqui para vocês uma dica. Quem sabe se a gente compartilhar bastante esse vídeo, sabe? Deixar o vídeo com bastante sucesso. Quem sabe ele não decide, num pós-pandemia, vir aqui no Brasil, conversar com a gente pessoalmente, sabe? Olhar pra gente com um pouquinho mais de carinho. É isso, gente. Indico muito o livro, tenho certeza que vocês vão gostar. Já disse e repito, é muito importante pra gente compreender o mundo que a gente vive. E não só a Tirania do Mérito, tá? Vocês podem começar por esse e depois vocês passeiem por todas as obras do Sandel, que com certeza vale muito a pena. Beijo, deixem o like de vocês, compartilhem esse vídeo e não se esqueçam de se inscrever no canal.